Devonta Smith's pro day will not be much of a pro day, and Jordan McNamara has thoughts about profiling and the risk assessment in a year where we have a lot of uncertainty here in 2021 with the NFL draft process. Welcome to the Footballguys Dynasty Show. I'm your host, Chad Parsons, and Devonta Smith, while Alabama's pro day was not today, we found out he will not only not be working out in a formal fashion, he will also not be getting measured in a formal fashion. And he's been one of the more polarizing prospects dating back to a torrid productive season with Alabama. But right when that ends, all of a sudden, how much will he weigh in? His BMI has been a constant Twitter discussion. And here we are, days away from the Alabama Pro Day. And yet he's already declared, you will not get me on a scale, hand size, height, any of these things. It feels, Jordan, like it's 1995 and it's one of the top running backs in the NFL draft, because those guys would say, go watch the tape, and you really just did not have much information on them, and yet they still went top 5. Devonta Smith is pulling out that running back card by saying, go watch the tape.
Yeah, and in a year that we have even more uncertainty, I mean, what's the incentive to go there, right? Why? I don't know. We look at profiles, and we want to go at profiles, and we know that BMI at wide receiver is significant. And I think you can probably shed some light on the historic comps for what we might see on Devonta Smith. But you sort of look at that, and then you just see the lightness of him. And might he hit? Yeah. But at the same time, it's a historically low percentage bet. And in a year where there's so much uncertainty, why do this to yourself? Why go there and take and take an even more uncertain bet? Just because we know, and it's not even uncertainty, right? That's the thing, right? It's not like we don't know what he's going to weigh. If it was good, he would do it, right? I mean, if it's good, if it's, hey, how'd you do on your tests? How'd you do on your test scores? Like, I'm not going to tell you. Like, all right, like we could say it's probably not great. Otherwise, if you scored 100, you probably would have been confident sharing that, and so that would just be the thing that I would point to and say, I mean, with all of these profiles, right? We're shooting at profiles. We want to shoot at big targets. Is it possible he's the Marvin Harrison outlier? Sure. But how many comps do we have since Marvin Harrison that didn't work out, right? And that don't, that don't, fit the prototypes. What's the Bill Parcells thing, right? We're drafting prototypes. And that's, I think that's for Dynasty, you shouldn't be making a ton of these exceptions, right? You should be living on rules and not exceptions. And Devonta Smith's he's going to be an exception. And what's interesting to me is the cost, because in Superflex, he could be a second round rookie pick. And if he's going to be a top 10 NFL draft pick, top 15 NFL draft pick, that's kind of interesting at that cost. But anything really before that, there's a lot of red flags popping up in his profile.
Yeah, what I think is interesting is, we both look at expected draft position over there, granting the mocks. We both talked to Ben, who runs that site, and it's up and running for 2021. So shout out to him. But the gap, a lot of the talk in early January was, Devonta Smith, top 5 pick, and it's basically him and then a new tier. Or maybe, Jamar Chase challenges that. Well, the data as of, a few days ago was now Jamar Chase is right around 5 overall, and Devonta Smith is actually closer to Jalen Waddle, where Smith is 10, Jalen Waddle 11, in that 2-3 kind of competition there. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities to think that Devonta Smith could be 3rd off the board now. And this trend could continue. I mean, like you said, this is not good news. You would not, how'd you do on the test? If it was 98, unless you were in perfection household, you wouldn't conceal that information. If your parents go to bed and you get home after them, your curfew's midnight, and they go, what time did you get home? If the answer was 11:30, you would say 11:30 because that's good news. You made curfew. If the answer is 4 a.m., you would say, I don't know. I forget. It was right around then. I don't know. And then that's when your mom was on the recliner at until 2 a.m. And she knows. She knows before she even asked you. This was just a polygraph test, old school polygraph test. And so for Devonta Smith, if he was 186 pounds, he would say that. He would be weighing in. If he was going to run 4.39, he would run. So this is not good news. He's not dealing with an injury. He didn't say a month ago, I don't know if I'm going to work out because I have an injury. That doesn't have anything to do with getting measured. But this is pretty unprecedented. Like you said, I mean, you pretty much do this when you have something to hide. It's not good news. And this bottom tier, I mean, his BMI is going to be 22 something. At that 6'1", 170, he actually just offhanded said, I weigh about 170. So
it's better than one, right?
Right, but it's like, but it goes back to that, So if you're just saying it, you're going to make that look good. Right? I mean, if he weighed 180, he wouldn't casually say 170, right? Like that's not. So he's probably 16X. And he said 170. We're rounding. But if you're below 24 BMI, first of all, the average wide receiver with a BMI goes around 5.6 of the NFL draft. They average 0.11 top 24 seasons. And their average peak season is wide receiver 70. Their hit rate is about 15%. There's been just 12 players that I have in my projection model to fit sub 24, and Devonta Smith now is firmly below that. 22 is like incoming rail thin freshman wide receivers coming out of high school. Honestly, like the only time I see 22s is that. Incoming freshmen, and they put it on, when they get into a college program. So this is just, like you said, unprecedented. The only other guy in this class that's even, below 180 right now is Tutu Atwell, who's going to be in that Marquise Brown sort of zone. And round one guys, I mean, this is unbelievable. I mean, Marquise Brown's BMI was 24. You see him out there, right? His BMI is 24, and it's because he's short. And so this is just, like you said, you're betting on the wide receiver in round one outlier we have ever seen. Period. I mean, I don't go back to Harrison. I go back to 1999. So it's a little bit, that predates a lot of my stuff. But this is, I mean, number one, I think people, first of all, overstate his production because it was later. And yeah, he had to wait for that depth chart to clear out. And so it's on the older side. He's 22.8 years old. He's a senior. These are not good markers when you talk about any level of draft, but especially round one. You're going for a senior guy. And that's, I mean, so Brandon Ayuk was a senior. He's on a good path, but he also, had a much better physical profile than Devonta Smith. Corey Davis was another one. Obviously, very, very slow starter. A lot of people consider him one of the weakest round one guys we've seen over the last 3 to 5 years in terms of that early career progression there. But again, senior, not a positive indicator. Low BMI, not a positive indicator. Late breakouts, not a positive indicator. This is for wide receivers as a whole, but especially, like you said, with the cost. Now, the interesting part, like you said, what if he's round 2 in a rookie draft? That's going to be the intriguing part. But that doesn't mean that I think that no matter what you pedigree chase, because we saw that. We'll see how Henry Ruggs turns out. But he was another one fading to round 2. And it's like, well, I got to take the pedigree, right? It almost sounded rhetorical last year. Oh, Henry Ruggs is there at 202. Well, again, how's that turning out versus T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk or other guys in that range? I think you have to look at the profiles. And Devonta Smith, again, he was productive. But you're talking about a rare, and not in a good way. There's rare in a good way. Guys that are almost a running back like build, or guys that are 6'6". Kyle Pitts, he's rare in a different sort of way, for example. So this is really the interesting part, is that he, in my view, he was almost a one-hit wonder because that was his one really good season. One season that actually points to, oh, this is like a round one type NFL draft profile or type of season you would see or want to see. But yet, I mean, for example, Rashad Bateman, I mean, every step of the way, he was younger and did more. And I just find it interesting that we're going to be faced with a deep reservoir of wide receivers, and yet Devonta Smith is going to be in a group with late round 1 or maybe even early day 2 wide receivers and where he goes in rookie drafts, which is going to make that the draft position, does it suck you in? Or do you say, well, look what he did. It wasn't a big deal at college. Will that, I think that's, for the film folks, that's going to be the biggest thing is, will this be a problem in the NFL? It didn't look to be a problem in college.
Yeah. One thing I'll say this year, I think more than, other years, draft pedigree is really important in terms of predicting hit rates and all of those things. It's the single most important thing in a player's profile. One thing that I've heard pretty consistently this year is because of the lack of the combine stuff, the GPS data is going to take on an increased import. So we will know, I think, if we see guys that are quote speed guys fall, right? That will tip us to that, right? That we should see some of that data reflected in the draft position. So if he's slower, right, and the Jalen Waddle's consistently been, when that information is leaked out, it's been him being the fastest one in this class. So if there's that speed issue, I think that's going to show up, and we'll probably see it with other players too. I think that's a big thing to look at. If he falls, right, and that's a better measurement for for speed than running in shorts is, right? What your speed is after when you have the ball in your hands or when you're running routes or all those change of direction stuff. I mean, good teams and good organizations can really use that stuff and some other stuff too that I know you've dabbled a little bit in some of the computer vision stuff, right? I do think the smart franchises are using that stuff and are going to use that stuff more and more as we sort of move away from, who knows if 2022 is going to have the same combine that 2020 and 2019 and all the prior ones had. It might look different. And I think that's probably cutting edge stuff. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. And this is this will be a good case to see how it influences some of that draft pedigree.
Yeah, I started doing a year or two ago doing the max speed study stuff. Where you're counting frame rates and all that stuff on clear, straight line type plays in college. And I really, when this started coming down the pipeline, that this draft process might not look the same, back last summer. And obviously when we got to January and, no combine and things like that, I was like, this is really going to come in handy because there are a lot of connectivity between the max speeds and the 40 times. And for Devonta Smith, the max speeds that I have are not aligned with a guy that runs 4.40. So that's what I would say. Obviously it's about confidence curves and there are outliers in terms of what plays can you find versus who did better with the 40 specific training and things like that. Looking at a couple other things, the round one guys since the last 20 years that are that were sub 180 pounds in the first round. First of all, not a great list. It's Marquise Brown, Tavon Austin, Ted Ginn, RJ Soward, and Dennis Northcutt. So pick out the best one you want of that group. One of them, and that is well below the innate hit rate. But here's the interesting part: the 40 times for all those guys: 4.33, 4.34, 4.38, 4.35, 4.43. So almost all of them are 4.3 guys to go that high. So I think you're onto something about does he still go highly? Does he? And again, I think highly is relative to maybe where we were a couple months ago, where it's like, oh yeah, he'll go top 5. But a lot of the talk is we're gonna have a bunch of quarterbacks, in the top 8 or so. So if you're getting 4 or 5 quarterbacks in the top 10 or 10 or 12 or whatever it is, then there's not a lot of room for other positions. And I don't think there's room for 4 wide receivers or whatever, lauded number that you think, this class deserves. So I think the really interesting part is if Chase goes ahead of him right now, that's projected. And then I think it's going to be a debatable point. Like you mentioned, I mean, the fastest guy in the draft may be Jalen Waddle, and especially with the dynamic speed measures. So if he ends up going wide receiver 3 of the class, does that push him outside the top 10? Does that push him to, the early teens or something? Where, I mean, that's a pretty decent drop considering where we started this process in January. So that's going to be the interesting part for me. And that may be kind of tip us off to the fact that these types of things are more of a concern for teams now that they're not going to get verification. It's like, oh, well, he's 178 pounds. Like, we can kind of work with that. He's actually, 6 foot, 72 inches and an eighth, so it's not 6'1" exactly, but he's got, we start hearing a lot of these other things, that sort of make it a little bit better, but we're not going to get those things. And so we'll see how NFL teams react in about 5 weeks. But I think Jalen Waddle going over Devonta Smith is a lot more possible than it was a month ago.
Yeah. Can I ask you the flip side of this, which would be, we're talking about profiles we don't like. I think a couple profiles that we probably do like, but we might not like for different reasons, which is Trevor Lawrence and Kyle Pitts. I think Trevor Lawrence is probably, when it's all said and done, he's going as a first round, or his pick is going as a first round startup pick. And that's other years that pick might be, 60% someone and 40%, the field or a situation. I think that 110 or that 101 going at 110 in a startup draft is almost 100% Trevor Lawrence. That's going to be the most expensive we've ever seen a quarterback go and Superflex as a rookie. And then at the same time, we're going to see Kyle Pitts, who, especially in Superflex drafts, he's going to be, I would say top 8, top 10, depending on sort of, I guess depending on how sort of the positions align would be a reasonable guess. It's going to be the most expensive we've ever seen a tight end be, especially when you go back and look at some of the start one data. How comfortable do you feel paying the top, right? So we didn't like paying the uncertainty at the bottom, right? How do you feel about paying sort of market setting prices for players that we've never seen, right? This is a new frontier in terms of paying for rookies. How do you sort of feel about these guys?
Yeah, I think for Trevor Lawrence, the problem I have is quarterback is very much a what is your aggregate profile look like, because it's a hard position. I mean, no matter who you are coming into the NFL, growing pains. I mean, Andrew Luck, growing pains, and he kind of worked through them, but plenty of them, and ultimately, got banged around. And for Trevor Lawrence, let's not assume, this situation, right? I mean, he's got some pieces around him. But the more I've thought about it over this draft process, you also have the Urban Meyer effect. If Urban Meyer does not work out, does that bleed over to Trevor Lawrence having a tougher road? A coaching change, which I'm sure that would be an appealing spot for a lot of folks if it happens in the next couple of years or whatever. But Urban Meyer, college coach, is he going to bring in schemes that are conducive? Do they work? Do they fizzle out over time? Is he going to get the NFL part of it? We've seen this not work a number of times. But Trevor Lawrence, the 101, going for a quarterback in the NFL draft, that's important. It is a different tier than number 2 through 10, 12, 15 overall. But when you have, I kind of think this is the glory age of quarterback. Now, you get beyond about 14, 15, 16 guys, not so much. But I really think we have quality depth. And, Joe Burrow's another one. I mean, I've traded him away in Superflex just because of this risk factor. And yet he's been durable over the last 12 months, even though now he's got injury, blah, blah, blah. So for Trevor Lawrence, he's going so high right now, though, that there's a lot of risk because you're assuming. I mean, he basically, and that what I always say is that year one, right? I mean, people are going to start shifting value after year one. Well, frankly, before that, but it's more dynamic. But the fact that him being a success, Joe Burrow was technically a success. He was like quarterback 19 or 20 last year. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have a guy that in one quarterback is basically unstartable. In Superflex, doesn't help you at all in year one. And yet the downside is, what if they don't look the part? I mean, Trevor Lawrence also, he's really thin. So this is another part. He's tall, and he's only like 210 pounds, 210, 213. I can't remember the exact weigh-in. So these are major factors that I think are, and we've got a good class. We've got 3 or 4 other guys that are going to go top 12 to 15. So when you've got that many choices and you're like, well, 101 costs me a first round startup pick, but I can get QB 3, 4, 5 distantly late, or I can get Dak Prescott for a similar cost, Russell Wilson for maybe less cost. All these guys, Justin Herbert did it last year. We've seen him for a decent sample size in the NFL, way more of a sample size than an incoming rookie. So these are the pivots, the arbitrages that are most intriguing specifically to this year. So if we had a decaying overall position and Trevor Lawrence is coming in. We haven't had some young guys in the last 2-3 years. I could see the argument. Like if Saquon Barkley comes in and all these other top running backs are 27, 28 years old, he deserves that sort of, acclaim and that valuation coming in. I get that, or Zeke or whatever. So Trevor Lawrence coming in, but that's not the case we're in. We're not starved for younger quarterbacks. I think we're pretty good to go in the sub 30-year-old, sub 28-year-old genre. So I think we're pretty fine. That's the biggest part that bugs me with 101 and Lawrence in 101. And it's interesting because in Superflex, I don't have a lot of 101s this year. So I would sort of be looking to pivot off of that. What's going to be the sweet spot moving down potentially, or trading that for 2 or 3 things that I really like and kind of mitigate that risk.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think the arbitraging off that pick, you can go like, what's the gap between that and Mahomes, right? And what's the gap down from him to any number of guys, right? There's a lot
down,
of
sideways, anything you want.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to play with. I think it could be pretty interesting there.
And then Kyle Pitts is an interesting one because the profile is so rare. That he's going to go high in the draft. I don't think it really matters. Does he go 3? Does he go 7? Does he go 10? The point is, it's really high for tight end, and we don't see that all the time. And he's a freak in a great way. He is a metric outlier, a rare profile of 6'6" fluidity. I mean, you see some videos that even if he runs 4.50, 4.55, it's really good. So if it's 4.45, that's great too. It's all great. But I think it really comes down to your thoughts on positional value, right? Because now there's people saying, oh, well, in Superflex, it should go Lawrence, and then, Pitts could go 2 or 3, and then in FFPC, right? I mean, you get a little bit of premium there, and it's like, well, he's going to be super valuable. But what I would say is, you can have him ranked highly in the tight end position, but you can still wonder how much that value is. So I really like him, but I do find it's tough to value him. If you don't get the premium versus Jamar Chase versus a top. So it's about floor and ceiling. I mean, obviously the floor for a round 1 tight end is basically they're going to hit top 12. But I would say if he doesn't start ripping off like whatever that top tier is it 1 guy? Is it 2 guys? Is it 3 guys that actually make a difference in a given season? If he doesn't get to that group, then I think whatever the cost, it's going to be like a mid-first or higher, probably in any format, maybe higher in 2 tight end and stuff like that. That if he doesn't reach that stratosphere of production, and I would say by year 2, I think people are going to look at that pick and be disappointed. What are your thoughts on that?
I think so. I'm with you on that. And I'll just say, I don't think we've done a particularly good job historically with some of the hit rates on tight ends in the first round of rookie drafts either. And that's a place where, right, if we were good at it, it would show up pretty consistently. I mean, here are the guys, the most expensive tight end we've ever had in terms of rookie draft data going back to 2008, Eric Ebron at 7.8. And then you get basically after that, it's OJ Howard at 8.2, and then Hawkinson's 8.5. And then after that, you get 3 guys right at the 11-12 turn. So you get Fleener, Noah Fant, Tyler Eifert right in that tier. So all of that together, I mean, it's a really tough position. And someone asked me this today, and I'm not firm on this answer yet because I could be convinced, and I'm trying to keep an open mind to a lot of different things, pedigree, situation, where they land, how the other positions all go, all that stuff. But I have a really hard time setting record prices on anything. I don't want to be right. I just,
it's like an IPO, right?
Yeah, it makes me really uncomfortable.
I've never thought of it that way before, but it's basically like an IPO. Your rookie draft investment in a player is before they pretty much debut. It's
Correct.
Basically like right away. And then a lot of times it sags back down. Every once in a while, they shoot through the ceiling. Every once in a while, they become a meteoric rise and shooting star. But generally, that's not the case. And generally, it's not the guys that are 101, 102, 103, because you already have that premium locked in. Now they're worth 101 and 102. They're worth so much. We generally don't see that, right? I mean, I don't think anyone right now would trade 101 and 102 for Justin Jefferson. Maybe some people would. But it's also tough for the one team to get both picks. But yeah, I think TJ Hawkinson versus Kyle Pitts is an interesting dynasty discussion because you have a strong profiled player that is, still 24 years old, has built a profile for production, and there's that bust risk that has been greatly reduced. Kyle Pitts, what if he gets hurt and it sort of derails things really early on? Like you said, what if he goes to a situation that's not totally conducive, even though he's a high pick? It's like, we're not going to make you the true feature element of the offense. You really have to see 125, 130 plus targets, really be that feature element to get all the way home and be a high-end tight end one. So there are some benchmarks. I'm not saying he can't get there. And if he does, being 20.9 years old, I mean, yeah, he's going to be Mahomesian in terms of he can lap the position for a while, in terms of it's him, and then there's a tier line, and then get in line. So that is possible. And that's what, I'm not going to say fading him, but that's what, if you're sitting there, you got 103, 104, and you're going to pick, another position, whether that's wide receiver 2, running back 2, you could look back and look silly, because it's like, well, just take the best players, right? Don't worry about positions and needs and all that stuff. But tight end really is an interesting one, because not many carry strong trade market, and it typically is a slow moving position. I mean, breaking into even the top 10 or 12 as a rookie is rarefied historical air. So just know that him coming in and finishing at tight end 15 as a rookie, or 18 or something like that, still pretty darn good. And yet, yeah. I think his value, the thing with tight ends that I've been telling myself over and over again, especially with, it's going to cost a first round rookie pick or an early second round rookie pick, and he's going to go far higher than that. But what I always tell myself is, generally you get second looks at guys. Like if you don't get Kyle Pitts, let's say he goes at 105 and you pass on him at 104, you can probably pay a mid first next year and get him. Probably. That he's not going to be so good as a rookie, and not get hurt and go to a good enough situation to see enough targets, to do enough that all of a sudden next year, which might not be as good of a class, you may be able to get, Jamar Chase this year, or, Travis Etienne, or whatever it is at 104, and then say, well, I got a year. Okay, I saw some promise from Kyle Pitts. Now let me pay 105 for. Let me pay my mid first, or let me pay a flip player and 110, or whatever, or let me trade this other tight end, for him. Now that I feel more comfortable with Kyle Pitts, so I think I'm more in that secondary market now for tight ends than I am. Let me make sure I get the guy as a rookie, because there's not a lot of downside that they're going to come in, shoot up the board, and Pitts all of a sudden it costs 101 next year. I just don't foresee that.
Yeah. The historically, if they're going to hit, they sort of hit on the just outside the top 12 as rookies, and less than half of them end up doing that. The other thing I would say too, a couple other points here. 60% of first round tight ends drop in valuation in year 2. So you're already betting against that, and you're betting at the top of the curve. You got a lot more room to go.
And how many are
things
close
that can go wrong?
And other than the ones that drop, how many are relatively close to what they cost? So
Right.
maybe they went up slightly. Maybe they're about the same. It's probably another 15, 20%. So like I said, you don't have a lot of ones where it goes completely sideways. I'm all in on Kyle Pitts and he got sniped from me. and then next January, you're going to have no cracks. Or what if he gets off to a slow start? You can get a little discount in November, So just this whole, you never get another shot at a player.
Historically,
really
yeah,
exactly.
The other thing too is the other thing, when you look at the tight ends since 2000, so this century, first round guys, only 6% of them have hit the first 3 years of their career for a top 12 seasonal finish. So basically a third of them have hit either twice or 3 times. A third of them have missed, and a third of them have hit once. So when you sort of look at, shooting at big targets, there's a lot more, and
year one's the least likely one. Year one is absolutely the least likely one. So you're not buying something for this year. You're really not. So ask yourself, what would a wide receiver, finishing in the top 36 or so, what is a running back, who usually just pummels people in terms of early impact. If they get the job in season, you can go for Kyle Pitts plus. Like that's if the running back you pick there, that has late round 1 or early round 2 pedigree, ends up having the job and has a decent game. That's it, right? I mean, now they're the guy. That week you have options, and that's how in-season trading and in-season player value works. And Kyle Pitts, might have had 5 catches in the first month of the season, for all we know. So this is Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 47 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And if you're into shows like this one, you're a serious Dynasty player, and you need to consider a Football Guys premium subscription. We already have the early bird discount now available for 2021. And you get the same league-winning information and guidance you always have, but you want to pay less. So once you get close to the season, you're going to pay full freight. So why don't you just sign up now? You're going to get all that premium content. You're not going to have to worry about when the faucet gets turned off for premium content there in July. You're going to already have it. It's going to be a seamless process for you. And what do you get? You get the edge of knowing you have the entire Football Guys staff on your side. And the biggest thing, it saves you time. So in addition to doing better in your leagues, you're going to do it with less time. So you can enjoy maybe spending more time on trades. You can maybe enjoy trash talking and sending out those messages to your league mates that are below you in the standings during the season, because you're already going to have the edge. You're already going to have the Football Guys guidance behind you. So all you have to do is head over to footballguys.com. There's a big orange button in the right corner that says join now. And that'll take you right to the early bird discount pricing as it stands right now. And we'll do the work for you, and you do the winning. So Jordan, we've got some dynasty trades, and I wanted to start off with a Deshaun Watson one, because he's a very, very polarizing one in the marketplace that we've both had some interesting observations. And this one is in a 10-team 2-quarterback league. So it actually is a little less than super flex. It is mandatory 2-quarterback, but you have only 20 starters across the league. We've got Deshaun Watson for Daniel Jones, 201. So it's 11 overall this year, and a 22 first. So you got something in the future, but you've also got number 11 overall. Maybe that's in the top 5 quarterbacks, but if it's not, pretty good. And then you've got Daniel Jones. Where do you sit on this in a 10-teamer?
Man, it's really tough, because I think I think at this point you have to assume he's going to miss the year, or that you are going to lose a year of him. That is the assumption I'm operating under, in terms of whether that be some sort of treatment, suspension, right? He's got to, I think he's in trouble. I could sort of be persuaded on how much criminal trouble he's in. I think that is a non-zero chance that he has some criminal exposure coming. And it is a non-zero chance it's significant criminal exposure based on a couple of the lawsuits that have been filed. Again, all this is alleged. So I think it's all risk tolerance. And you and I co-GM a team, and I sent a text to you the other day, and it just said, how much risk tolerance do you have? And I mean, that is a question. So with Deshaun Watson trades, I mean, a hard time telling you what to feel on this, because I think it's all about how much risk tolerance that you have. If I had to bet, I think something like a year suspension and no criminal exposure, and him sort of getting out of this, whatever money thing is, I think that's a success. I think that's a success at this point. And so how do you weigh that? The problem is with you're sort of weighing that, right? It's the, that pick might hurt, right? Because if you're trading away your pick and you're not getting Deshaun Watson, that pick could be pretty high. So that would be the thing there. I think ultimately, I mean, it's a lot about how much upside you want to shoot for. And in this, I mean, I don't think Daniel Jones that highly. I think you're probably out of the realm of like a true difference maker at 11. And I think Watson still has that upside, and maybe things can break right for him. Probably take the Watson side, but man, I don't feel good about it. I really don't.
Yeah, I think the biggest stick point for me is Daniel Jones. Get someone different that can actually help you now. Like, to be fair, I mean, give me Tom Brady. Give me Tom Brady on a couple year window or a rolling 1 year window, because Brady helps you right now, and then you have the pick. You at least have the pick next year, and then you have 201. Heck, you might be able to get a little better in this package than if you swap Brady for Daniel Jones in there, or maybe Jameis Winston. take a shot. And because Daniel Jones, I just don't have a lot of confidence that he's even going to be an NFL starter in, say, a couple years. I just don't have that. I mean, he could easily get on this 4-month path where he goes to risky, and now they're readjusting the position. Maybe they signed a veteran. They draft another guy in the first round. Like, all these things are in play for him. So I would rather get something that's more stable, or Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford, guys like that. So if you're going to pivot and get other things, at least get a quarterback that, again, has that track record, where Daniel Jones, he's on the bus track. I'm sorry. And the odds are dwindling. And I believe, I was looking at career arcs, that this is the critical year for Daniel Jones, that if he doesn't show tremendous progress, he's going to be basically, if he ever hits beyond that point, the outlier upon outliers. And frankly, NFL teams start to get fidgety and moving on with their franchise hopes and dreams and progression as well.
You end up where Baker Mayfield is right now.
Right. All right. FFPC, we've got 301 and a third next year for Zack Moss. Give us the skinny for the Buffalo backfield as well.
Oh dear. FFPC too, right? Because it's a roster spot there.
Exactly.
Superflex, non-superflex, doesn't really
one
matter,
quarterback.
Probably.
No,
one quarterback. Give me the picks. Listen, I'm just not a huge fan of Zack Moss, and I think Devin Singletary is by far the better football player, and I don't even think it's that close. I just struggle to see how they're going to. I mean, you're going to run. Your quarterback's going to. Josh Allen's going to run in, 8 touchdowns a season, which is about the pace that he's on right now. I mean, that's a lot of points you're giving up. So
it's like having the lead running back of a Cam Newton offense. Do you really want that?
Exactly.
Is that all that valuable? Give me 301. Right. Let's stay flexible. Save the roster spot. Keep somebody else. We've got deadlines coming up in the next week or so. And yeah, I mean, if you're purging out, get a couple picks. I know you'd probably rather get a second rounder for Moss or second to first upgrade or whatever. Those things aren't on the cards. Then just, keep moving back. I think the third round is significantly better in FFPC than the fourth round, is what I've kind of observed over the last couple of years. So, try to stay in that mid third or earlier, but try to get whatever you can. Move up for guys that are on that fringe for you. And if it means you have 14 positional keepers, if it means you're trading out number 12 or number 13 instead of 14, then so be it. But I think that format teaches you who is a difference maker, who's a potential difference maker, and then who really just kind of blends in. It feels weird to say that they're a cut or fringe cut, but they really are in that format.
Right.
All right. Superflex, Jalen Reagor for 204.
So I think this comes down to, what do you think you're getting at 204? So that's the question that I would have. Again, I'd take the Reagor side of this, but you could persuade me. You could say, hey, listen, if this is a pick that could reset the clock on a first round wide receiver, I'm not investing in Jalen Hurts, whoever. But the problem is that at this point, right, let's just say optimistically that's 5 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, a tight end. Already you're up to 11. So you're looking at, what is that? So that's 16. You're looking at like wide receiver 5 in the class, 5, 6 in the class, somewhere in that range if things break right. Maybe 4. Maybe you get a couple guys jump in there ahead of, that break that formula up a little bit. Maybe there's an extra running back. I don't know. I guess I can see the reset if you think you're going to get someone close there, but I struggle to think you're going to at that point to get someone. Is that Bateman? Do you think Bateman could get to 204? Because I don't think so.
I guess it's possible. But yeah, you're probably looking late for maybe the last wide receiver in round 1, or maybe whoever you prefer the most from round 2. It kind of falls there. With Reagor, here's the problems. And again, I'm coming from, I like Jalen Reagor as a player, but he finished low enough as a rookie that the odds aren't tremendous that he turns into a top 24 guy. So does Henry Ruggs, by the way. You're kind of investing. I think the draft is a risk, because if they don't go quarterback, a lot of the indicators are they go wide receiver, in the early first round there. So I'm not a Jalen Hurts fan. So you're investing in that combo already negative. So if they draft a quarterback in the first round, now you're like, okay, I'm kind of back in, because that also means they didn't draft wide receiver. But if it goes the opposite, so there's a lot of variance there for Jalen Reagor, just situationally and foundationally with that offense. So that's a big part of it for me. I would, I think one of the whole keys is staying liquid, right? Staying liquid, staying flexible, staying insulated as much as you can. So for Jalen Reagor, I think the super flex part is key, and 204 gets you flexible. I mean, if you have another second round pick, you can get into the first round. If you have a late first, you can move into the mid first maybe with those 2 picks. So I just like a lot of that flexibility. And so as much as I like Reagor, if they go with a high first wide receiver, I'm sorry, you would love to take this deal in late April, early May. And if there's a reasonable chance of that, and there is, then I think you got to take the pick. I think the pick is high enough. You'd rather have it 201, 202, or just as high as you possibly can get. And 204 is getting borderline. If it was 206, I'd probably keep Reagor no matter what. But we're close enough. I probably would take the pick at this point, just based on year one, just based on the historics, and based on it being another good wide receiver class, like you said, to reset.
All right, just real quick with the survivorship. I got the survivorship numbers going back. So this is the amount of wide receivers drafted ahead of. So for Reagor, you're looking at guys that have teams that have drafted a first round wide receiver and then gone back and drafted one ahead of him the next year, 3% of the time. When you look at over the next 3 seasons, it's 10%. So it's super unlikely historically for that to happen. When you look at second round guys, so this is a question that I have with guys like Higgins, right? Because I think it's not that different in terms of when you look at just the aggregate number of picks, but it is a big difference psychologically. The number for day 2 for round 2 guys is 20% after 1 year. So that is a huge difference. I mean, you're looking at double the rate of a round 1 guy over 3 years. I mean, that is a huge difference. So I would just be one thing that I would say historically be rarely unlikely. And I think they're lying through their teeth if they're saying they're not interested at quarterback at 6. So that's the other thought.
Yeah, but I don't even know what the game would be, because they're in a position where they can still get a quarterback, and it's like, but and maybe it's like they have their eye on only one guy, one non-Lawrence guy that they really want or something like that. But
it's all smoke shield.
But getting a second round 1 wide receiver is really unlikely, but again, going by mock draft data, there's a much higher than, you said 3%, much higher than 3% when you see mock drafts out there with the Eagles and what they're doing in round 1. All right, we've got, and talk about positioning ourselves in rookie drafts. We've got 12 team Superflex giving 206, 207, and 307 for 201. So is this an expensive move up? Is this a good proactive one? Could you be tier jumping, and positioning yourself, and maybe depth of league? How much would that play a role here?
Depth of the league definitely plays a role. So if you're looking, if this is FFPC, it's a different calculus than it is, in our going deeper 40-man roster type situation. We need to hoard as many tight ends as we can possibly get. Yeah, I mean, so just going back to the same rough calculus that I had, that puts us at kind of, if we assume 5 quarterbacks, maybe that's quarterback 5. What is that? Running back 4, wide receiver 3 or 4, something in that range. If you get up to 201, 201 gives you more access to even higher. I'm surprised it costs this much. Is my inclination. Like I think the second round could be pretty rich. I mean, I don't think
it's not going to be running back rich though. See, that's going to be the interesting part. At 206, 207, I think you're going to be looking at day 3 running backs. So if you take that position out of the equation and you're taking the optimal quarterbacks, I don't know. I think this is actually pretty nice. Like if I was a team where it's like, I don't think I'm going to be able to make all my picks, and you're doing it proactively, I think you're getting high enough. 201, we just talked about 204, so this is even better. And like you said, I think you could get a look at QB5 or pretty easily a round 1 wide receiver. So I think I would do it, because the ancillary things, 307 doesn't matter in this, and 206, 207, I just don't think, I think you're going to get a look at a suboptimal running back personally. So yeah. Anyway, so even if it's one you like, day 3 Pedigree, I mean, that's going to be one mid-second super flex. You probably shouldn't be making that bet. So with no premiums on tight end. I mean, you might be looking tight end 3, maybe something like that. So, all right, let's go to the quotes from the Football Guys Dynasty Forum of the week. Got some saucy ones. Start off with a little Josh Jacobs talk. That's one we haven't talked about much. I think there's a non-zero chance this is Josh Jacobs' last season as a full-time feature back.
I mean, if you're telling me I have to agree with something being a non-zero chance, I'm going to agree with it. I think it's a very small chance. I don't know where, I don't know. Some of the narrative stuff builds on this. And when you sort of look at the data, it's fascinating to me that people were knocking the Raiders for rejiggering their offensive line, right? They went in and basically cut a bunch of people, traded some, I don't remember all the names, but basically, for a period of time, we're without their offensive line from last year, and they brought a couple guys back. But this was like one of the worst performing offensive lines relative to cost. It was absolutely relative to cost. It was the most expensive offensive line in the game, and they were like 27th in terms of run win rate. So that's not good. When you look at it, Jacobs is above expectation in terms of his rushing numbers, right? So that's a place you go to look and say, hey, how good is somebody? He was above expectation. That's above what's blocked and is available to him. So I know that the yards per carry numbers are low. We can just ring the bell on that's the worst stat to judge a running back by.
QB wins. QB wins are right up there too.
No, that's true. QB wins. That's a big one. And the other thing too with him is I don't think that Drake. So I don't think Kenyon Drake's that good. Is I guess the first part. And, people bring him in to be this receiving back, which he hasn't been a good one. But maybe
people
1 year in his 5-year
Chase Edmonds was better in Arizona for what, half a season? They were like, Chase Edmonds should be the starter, and all this. And what is it? Arizona lets him go, and yes. We'll see about Chase Edmonds over the next year or two, what his actual outcome is. But yeah, what if Drake is overrated in this scenario? And what if the Raiders really wanted to secure their number 2 back where Devontae Booker gone, and what do they have else? Jalen, they got a bunch of mishmash puzzle pieces. So they needed in their view, they wanted a good number 2 back.
Yeah. What do you see? What do you say when you see your friends and they one guy dates this girl, dates a woman or whatever and breaks up with her, and then she goes and dates somebody else and then breaks up with them, and then you're standing there. And, you're talking, in the back of your mind, you're like, what did the other two guys know that I don't know? And Miami and Arizona both let Kenyon Drake walk out the door. I don't know.
And also so this whole, and let's face it, he went to a number 2 role. Like, does anybody think right now that he is the week 1 starter and he's going to see 65% of the touches?
He doesn't even think that.
I know some of parts of his family may think that. I mean, they've always believed in Kenyon. So I just anyway. But the fact is, he's going to a number 2 job, right. And the round 1 running back again. It's just it's pretty durable for at least their rookie contract. Through those first 4 or 5 years, and he's
50%. Yeah, he's a 50% shot to produce a top 24 seasonal finish each of the next 3 years historically. So that's the kind of path that he's on. So,
yep. In my opinion, dynasty players, especially those in big roster leagues, worry too much about acquiring depth talent.
I agree with that to a certain extent. I think it's important in big to have deep rosters. But I was having a conversation with some people today, and it was like, I forget the quarterback that was involved, but it was like a move of, it's going to hurt it was like a quarterback in like right around quarterback 10, something like that. It was like Lamar Jackson or Aaron Rodgers or something like that. And they had to trade a wide receiver to go up to Mahomes. And it's like, well, should I do this? I'm going to lose the wide receiver. And I was like, who cares? like you do it. I do think depth, right? So that's a scenario where if you're going to get a premium asset, right? I've said before, I don't think there's any price it's tough to pay too high of a price for Patrick Mahomes. So that would be a situation where I don't let it get in my way. But that said, I mean, I think if you can build depth, right? Your goal should be good process, because what happens is if you have good process year over year over year, and that is selecting, the pedigree fallers and rookie drafts, right? That is churning your roster. That is being efficient. And you keep doing that, you're going to build depth, and it's really tough for people to get around you ultimately. And what you start seeing is you have, your running back 5 looks a lot like other people's running back 3s. And you start doing that. Like, that's a really demoralizing thing to look at as an opponent. So I do think it's important, but not at the expense of, I think people sometimes can be penny rich and pound poor in the, I don't want to pay from my depth to go get a truly elite piece. So I think that there's a middle ground there that's probably wise.
Yeah, I think one of the bigger demystification parts of being a dynasty owner is kind of that sense and feel. Like it's tough to explain. Like when you do a bunch of startup drafts, for example, like having that feel for trading up, trading back, what's good value, who's likely to be where, kind of stacking up your board, what makes sense. Like all those innate things that really is tough for people if you haven't done a bunch of them, and of different years and different settings and different environments. Just having that experience factor is key. Just like a quarterback, you see more blitzes, you see different coverages and stunts and all this, and all of a sudden 10 years in, you kind of have a feel for it. Not that nothing ever surprises you or beats you. It's just that, you've seen so much. So I think with startup drafts, it's that way. But I think with dynasty trading, it's the same way, that it's tough to have that feel for, okay, I really need to right now be in the consolidation mode, or I'm still in accumulation mode. Like I shouldn't really be cashing in 2, 3, 4 things to move way up in a rookie draft to get my guy or that one guy. I really need to take these 3 or 4 shots, in the first 18 picks, instead of moving up and just getting 102. Like, so you
Right.
kind of need to have that sense of, am I still building quality depth, or am I good enough where I need to start consolidating down, constricting, and the only trades I make pretty much are either to get big rookie pick upgrades for now or the future, or to get auto start players. And I think that's really the thing, that having that feel for when is the time to start doing that. And ideally you just keep doing that because, now you have those auto start players, you're building the depth of a higher tier. So, all right. I feel the higher I move up in the draft, the better player I get.
Historically we feel that, but I think it depends on where you're looking. And the difference between right now, it's nice to be up higher because it gives you more options, but ultimately, especially at quarterback, if you're looking at the difference between, 102 and 106, and you condition 106 on, hey, I'm getting quarterback 4, right? That there isn't a big difference there historically. So I think when you it feels like you're getting a better option, probably because you have more power, you have more options, you have your choice. But that's a lot of the reason why I like to pick and choose my spots to move down very intentionally, to do it, to get to certain price points that I want to spend on certain players. That's why I like to be up, and then as the draft goes along, right, I can move my way down, and I'm doing it from a position of power and strength by being up higher, than doing it from a position of desperation, right, trying to move up. So
the thing I like best about being higher in the draft is really the falling players. That if right now, if you're sitting at 3, for example, and it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to get, running back 1, wide receiver 1, whatever. I say, hold on. Don't assume logical drafting. Don't assume rational. What do we say? Assume rational coaching in the NFL, right?
Right.
But don't assume rational general managing in Dynasty. So, you're sitting at 3 or 4, and you're like, that's why I find it funny when people are like, oh, well, I have a big 9 on my big board, so I had to get to 9. You are taking a huge leap that there's not going to be one rogue pick off of your big 9 within the top 9 or top 8. So you were sitting there at 11 and you don't think you have a chance at one of your top 9 guys. Wow. That's all I say. Like, wow. Is it a league of only your, podcast listeners or subscribers or whatever? Yeah. Is that the only environment you draft in? Because that's what I love about being at 103. You have a chance right now to get whoever 101 is on your board because you're close enough. If you're at 7, that's not going to happen. But
Right.
you can get a falling player. That's to me the biggest part of being higher is getting someone you don't deserve to get. Like last year, if you're sitting anywhere in the top 5, you had a chance. You had a chip in a chair with whatever that running back order was, that you had a chance to get your running back 2 at 4 or 5 or whatever, because you had a chance. You were in the game. And I think, if you're at 11, you're not really in the game. But yet if you're close enough, you got a chance for a rogue pick. You got a chance that maybe they trade the pick to someone who's going to go rogue in front of you.
Yeah, and last year's a great example of that too, because as we were sitting here a month before the draft, we would not have predicted Clyde Edwards-Helaire was going to be the running back 1 or running back 2 in rookie drafts. That wasn't really something that was in our full spectrum of ranges of outcomes. So, that being up really high allows you to be the beneficiary of that as well. So that's one of the primary benefits of being up there early. I'm not necessarily sure there's a huge difference between what you get historically at 104 versus 108, for example.
Yeah. Last one, and we're going to bring it home, close to home for Jordan. I think Gabriel Davis is the 4th best wide receiver on his own team next year.
I don't disagree with that.
He can't say he agrees. He just says he does double negatives. I don't disagree.
No, I mean, you like Emmanuel Sanders, and I was listening to a podcast. It was I think it was The Athletic. They did a breakdown of like who has thrown him the ball in the past like 4 or 5 years. It is incredible. It's like
Brandon Cooks.
I think. Yeah, it's no. It's Trevor Siemian. I think was the leading, and there was one other person I can't remember who. Maybe Nick Mullins or someone like that. But it was a pretty wild list of people. And Cole Beasley's no joke. I mean, that is a scary offense in terms of some of the guys that they have there. I do look at some of the production stuff, some of the yards per route run. That's some advanced metrics over there. PFF has them, and Gabriel Davis wasn't good at that last year, right? That is a pure production stat. It is just simply how much you did with how much you were in the game, and he wasn't that good. So a lot of the flashy stuff, yeah, he made some big plays, but I think he's more of that guy than he is wide receiver 2 chain mover on the opposite side of Stephon Diggs.
You have to have a prism of he had a nice day 3 wide receiver season. So yes. That still doesn't mean that someday that means you're like 50 overall in the NFL draft and you have some sort of promise of a number 2 role in that offense. And what I always say about this whole thing is it's Stephon Diggs and then everybody else. So there's going to be a capped. So Gabriel Davis for me is going way too high. And I just can't believe that they would bring in Emmanuel Sanders and the intent is, well, he's going to get 42 targets. Gabriel Davis is really going to be the guy, but we needed Emmanuel Sanders too, just in case. No, I think plan A is going to be 80, 85 targets for Emmanuel Sanders, and Gabriel Davis is going to be kind of stuck where he was, and Cole Beasley. I mean, he's one of the underrated guys in the NFL right now. So it's tough. It's tough. Yeah. And, if they improve tight end, I mean, that's just going to take away from ancillary wide receivers as well. All right.
Jacob so 180 targets to Stephon Diggs. Give me that.
Exactly. Take that. So we covered a lot of ground. We talked a little Deshaun Watson, Devonta Smith, one of the more interesting pre-draft processes of a prospect we've had in quite some time. Talked about dynasty trading, positioning yourself in rookie drafts. We also talked about the Raiders backfield a little bit. And we also talked about team building and some of those mental hurdles that it takes as you become a seasoned dynasty GM. So I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your dynasty leagues.